I don't know. I'm new here. I just got this job. Can we pause for a second? My nose is running. Hi, and welcome back to the second episode of From Art to Atoms, the Ultimate Curiosity Show. I'm Brandon Shoemaker.
And I'm Michael Foles.
So today we're going to take a dog leg of a turn from our topic last week. We discussed a pop culture-ish topic of Zennials. And today we're going to be talking about DNA and genetics.
More specifically, though, nature versus nurture. Like how much of your personality is built into your genes and how much of it is based on how you grow up and environmental variables.
So Michael is a biology teacher by trade, so he is a bit of an expert in this area. And I am the layman in this conversation because it's a topic that fascinates me, but I don't fully understand.
What don't you understand?
Well, I get the fact that our genes determine all of these traits that we have, but I guess I have a lot of questions. How do they know how to interpret it? Why does every cell need a copy? Why does my skin cells need to know what color my eyes are?
I thought you was going to say your breath, what color your breath was. And for the record, today it's a little green for both of us because we are fighting off some sinus stuff.
Yeah, we're both a little under the weather, so if we sound a little stopped up, that's why.
Yeah. Okay, so breaking it down basically on genetics and your DNA. So DNA is simply made of a small molecule of repeating patterns. We call these things monomers. I want you to think of just a chain link fence where there's one small link, and then if you have repeating links, it becomes a pattern. So your DNA is built into these small links called nucleotides. This is your monomer, and they're made of 3 different parts. 2 parts are made of what we call the backbone of the DNA. The DNA has a 5-carbon sugar backbone connected to a phosphate molecule. Your 5-carbon sugar is known as deoxyribose. It is the sugar that our DNA is made of, which is where DNA gets its name from.
Deoxyribonucleic acid.
Exactly. And the type of molecule that this is a nucleic acid, which is where the Na comes in. So those are just repeating patterns in every single living organism.
So wait, hold on. What's a nucleic acid then?
The nucleic acid is the monomer of the DNA, which is the polymer, the larger molecule. So a nucleic acid is one of, let's say that your DNA is made of Legos. And I'm going to take a brick that is a 3x2 brick of red. And then I'm going to take a 2x2 brick of black.
Okay.
And I want you to make just a long, tall tower of nothing but 3x2 red bricks and 2x2 black bricks.
Okay.
One on top of the other in repeating patterns. That is how the DNA is going to look like. And when you say the DNA looks like a ladder, I want you to think of building a ladder. That is the tall tower. One of the legs of the ladder is that.
Okay.
Okay. And so every living organism on the planet has the same backbone structure in their genetics, their DNA. So it's got the same pattern. And so on the inside or the rungs of the ladder are these little molecules called nitrogen bases. And there are 4 different nitrogen bases in DNA.
Oh, wait. Are those the ATGC?
Yes, these are the letter representations of these molecules. Yes,
which stand for adenine, thymine, guanine,
and
cytosine.
That's correct.
I remember stuff. Thank you, Miss Brown from biology.
You have those 4 letters. And so the difference between me and you, or the banana that I ate this morning for breakfast, is that combination of letters, the amount of letters that we have, and the order that those letters are put in place. That's the difference between every living organism.
So even plants have those same 4.
Even bacteria have those same 4.
Okay, cool.
And that's a good thing for us, especially when you think of in terms of how we have to repair our DNA and how we have to get more of it, because every single one of your cells has to have an entire strand of copy of your DNA. Now, I want you to think of a recipe book. So if you're making a copy of you, let's say that you need to repair skin that was broken, or you are growing as a teenager or a child, and you have to make more cells to
To
increase.
literally make more of you.
Correct. And so each one of your cells has to have an exact copy of the DNA in it. Now, the good thing about that every living thing that has that same structure of DNA is that when you eat something, you're eating their cells
Oh,
and therefore intaking also all of their DNA, which means that you're going to break down their DNA into parts of the nucleotide
our DNA.
that then is used by your body to build your DNA.
Oh my God, this is so cool.
So mind-blowing that this is that the DNA that makes you up is not original to you. It is at the biomolecular level recycled material from something
Right.
that was once living.
Well, and that's just like if you take it even further down to the atomic level, how all the atomics, how all the atoms in our body came from the stars.
That is correct. So we are basically just recycled material, and we will, once we die, become recycled material again to be used by other living things.
Fun fact, I think well, yeah, you know this already, but that's actually why I want to be cremated when I die, because I don't like the thought of my biogenetic atomic material just wasting away in a box where nothing else can use it.
Fun fact, if you're cremated, actually, though, the ashes aren't really that usable.
Well, maybe not
They
the
are to a
ashes,
certain extent.
but
The carbon that is in your body will be used, but your best bet is going to do what I'm doing, and I'm going to be planted into a pod under a tree seed, and then the tree's roots will then bury into my remains and use me as nutrients.
yeah, but that sounds really expensive.
No. It's just a hole and a visit to Home Depot for a pot of seeds.
Ew.
No, I think they're actually new. That's a whole nother topic, though. Cremation. Okay. Anyway, back to DNA. So looking at this, though, the repeating pattern of DNA is not actually what makes your genes. It's not what makes all of your traits. It's just the recipe for those things. And so your body's going to use all of these different nucleic acids and the combination and patterns of it to make what we call an amino acid chain. And so this polypeptide chain is then going to become a protein. And the protein is what's going to allow you to do everything in your body. The nature of proteins allows us to they support growth. They are hormones. They are nutrients. Proteins control all of our traits. So they are really kind of the doers of the genes or the traits, but the DNA is the instructions to build that protein.
Okay.
So by default, that's the recipe. The amino acids are the ingredients. The protein is the final product.
Okay. And then the protein does
Everything in your
all
body.
all the things.
All of the genetic expression that your body will entail. Everything from turning a brown trait on to hair color to turning off hair growth itself.
Ah, like you, for example, now.
That's correct. And so the DNA itself is really interesting in that aspect of it. So looking at that, though, there are different things that the nature versus nurture debate, because how much of our genetics really controls our behavior and different aspects of our lives, such as our sleep, because sleep apnea is a product of genetics. You can be conditioned for sleep apnea.
Huh.
You can be conditioned for diabetes. You can be conditioned for Parkinson's. So all these different things can be genetically passed on.
Right.
Cancer in one aspect also can be passed on, but usually cancer is seen as an after birth disease, not a because of birth coming from parent to child.
Well, yeah, because there's lots of environmental factors that lead to cancer
Correct,
a lot of
correct.
times.
But it can be passed down, but it's very, I don't want to say rare, but it's not more likely to be passed down than it is to be picked up after birth through the environment.
So it's more likely.
It is not more likely to be passed down through genetics from mother to offspring.
So in other words, all those times that I've turned down the cancer policy at work because I'm like, nobody has had cancer in my family, I'm basically screwing myself over.
It really depends on your exposure to things that cause cancer.
Oh, well.
And looking at your skin color, you don't have to worry about skin cancer. So
What? I thought I have to worry especially about skin cancer. I thought pale people have to.
yeah, but you don't go outside that much. So
This is true. Okay. Oh, I see where you're going with it
Yeah.
now. Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, But the nature versus nurture debate goes on because really you're looking at the nature, which is going to be the hereditary factors, the physical appearances, your personality characteristics, versus the nurture aspect of it, which is going to be your experiences as childhood, relationships that you've built socially, any surrounding culture from childhood, and also from family matters. So, there have been studies on this topic where identical twins have been separated at birth and raised in two different environments, and how much of that is the same and how much of that is different when they get older growing up, because identical twins at birth have exactly the same copy of DNA.
Right.
And then throughout childhood, and I will say honestly, the further you move away from birth, the more the DNA changes through different environmental factors and stuff like that. And
now fraternal twins are just like any other siblings, right?
That's correct. They have two different copies of two different sets of DNA. It's different. It's just like you and a younger brother, but same mom and dad, but just younger. It's the same difference.
So you have a twin sister. Obviously, she's a girl for one, or a woman. Sorry, Marcel. So obviously that's no more genetically similar than if you had been born at different times.
That is correct. And the way that works is a whole different process known as meiosis, which is development of egg and sperm, or our sex cells. And that's what makes us different. And so I'll give you an example of the nature thing with identical twins and how this can be different. Because if you're looking at identical twins and their DNA is the same as adults, let's say that one gets cancer, is the other one going to be concerned, or should that other one be concerned about also acquiring cancer with the same DNA? So you also have to look at the fact that our DNA, as we get older, changes. There are certain environmental factors, which I'll ask you questions. What do you think are some environmental factors that would change our DNA as we get older?
Oh gosh, exposure to radiation.
Okay.
Even diet, I would imagine, can at some level.
Okay.
I don't know. Can experiences change DNA?
Not so much. I'm thinking like physically. How can physically DNA be changed? Let's say that one picks up smoking as a teenager, the other one doesn't. That's going to change their DNA.
Right.
Exposure to any carcinogens, which are things that cause cancer. You mentioned something about radiation. Let's talk about the UV rays from the sun. That exposure to that will also change, because what's happening with the sunlight is that when that hits your cells, the UV rays, particularly the UVB rays of the sun, actually can mutate your DNA. And in mutations, that's how, like, if a person does get cancer that way, the cancer itself is just, it's not a disease in the fact that it can be caught by someone like a flu. I can't give you cancer by coughing into the air and you breathe it in that air. The cancer itself is just a cell that does not stop replicating. It does not know when to turn off the replication process. And so it goes through this cycle. And instead of coming out of that replication process at a normal pace, it grows and grows and grows, which is what then results as a tumor, which is basically a big lump of cells that are clumped together. And so what'll happen there, though, is that if you have the DNA, let's say that you have, as a female, you have breast cancer, and then you have a child. Is it possible that the DNA of that breast cancer cell could be passed on to your child? Probably not.
Okay.
But let's say you have ovarian cancer. And is it possible that the ovarian cells can be passed on to your child? Yes, because they are basically that egg cell that's going to become that child.
Oh, so since it directly involves the system of reproduction.
Correct.
Then
the chances are higher that it's passed on. So it really depends on which cells are mutated. It really depends on the level of mutation also. And so you can have more than one mutation on every strand of DNA. So,
well, I want to go back to skin cancer for a second.
Okay.
So as an example, so if I'm out in the sun and my skin gets irradiated by the UVB rays. UVB.
Yes.
Sorry. My skin gets irradiated by the UVB rays. What's the difference between a cancer cluster forming versus it metastasizing? Is that when it spreads to other systems?
Yes.
What happens in between there? Is it literally the copies of the mutated cells spread that information elsewhere?
Well, so if it's in the skin cell, the problem is that your cells are going to travel. They travel through the bloodstream. And if they get into the bloodstream itself, they can move around. With skin cells, though, the skin cells that you're going to have the cancer in usually don't get into the bloodstream and travel around.
Right.
Okay. So you're looking at epithelial cells, which are going to be, those types of cells that would have to get into the bloodstream to then move around and then get dropped off basically into another part of the body to then start developing there as well. And so it is possible that if one skin cell that has a cancerous DNA in it gets out and travels, it can find a way into it, but it's super rare in that way.
So is skin cancer less deadly than other cancers?
Skin cancer is probably, I'm not going to say less deadly because it's easier to get than other cancers because of the exposure to UVB rays. But let's say that you have lung cancer due to smoking. Your lungs are already inside the body. They're already traveling around also through the bloodstream because of what they have direct access to the bloodstream, I should say, because of the nature of the purpose of the lungs itself,
right,
the gas exchange. And so if those cells were to come off and move around, you'd have a higher chance of getting cancer somewhere else in the body. Yes. So I'm not an expert on this, obviously, but I would say that looking at logically, the internal organ type cancers are probably going to be more inclined to spread than skin cancer would.
Okay.
So
getting back to our original topic of DNA versus and including nature versus nurture, what are some of the things that scientists look at that spark this debate?
I think a lot of it is,
because when I think about it, I automatically think of behaviors.
And that's where I was going to say is that I think that a lot of it is through behaviorism. Behaviors feel that actions and behaviors are a result of conditioning. And again, it's the environment you grow up in. It is what you're taught as a child. It's belief system. Theorist John B. Watson said that people could be trained to do and become anything regardless of their genetic background, which would play into it because if you think about it, that goes into intelligence also. Okay? Because intelligence, part of our genetics is not our level of intelligence, but the way the mind works, which then blends into the level of intelligence. How your mind operates, and that's that right brain versus left brain. Some people are more right brain, some people are more left brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, because last night I was watching an episode of The Unexplained on the History Channel with William Shatner. Sidebar, talk about William Shatner for a second and the fact that he's over 90 and still does TV and all this sort of stuff and goes to outer space.
Yeah.
Well, that impresses me at least. But anyway, on the episode, they were talking about one of the case studies was a set of fraternal twins. No, excuse me. They were siblings. They weren't even twins. They were siblings. A boy and a girl who both turned out to be prodigies in different ways. The boy wound up graduating from college at the age of 15, going on to, I think he went on to medical school or something like that. And his sister was more of a music and arts prodigy. But what was interesting is the fact that their parents were not necessarily exceptional. They said they just started noticing these behaviors in both of their kids when they were very young, like before a year old even, where they would be able to recognize numbers. I think it was at like 6 months. They asked the boy, "Show me your eyes," and he could point to his eyes. So there was clearly something going on there that had to be genetic on some level because it was from such an early age. But at the same time, I guess it could have been an unexpressed gene in the parent or parents.
Yeah.
And then the same thing for the girl. I think they said that she was just naturally harmonizing with songs and things like that as soon as she was able to make sound. So is that more a nurture kind of a thing, or is it more genetic, even though the parents weren't necessarily exceptional themselves?
Well, the thing is that, like I said, the brain itself is different for each person. And so although we have the same genetics, the operation of the brain may be different because the neurons as a child are growing so fast and changing that the synapses connections could be made in different aspects of the brain. which let's say like my twin sister. Okay. Growing up, she was very sportsy. Was that a great sports person, played it, loved them, had passion for them.
Athlete is the word you're looking for.
I am not that person.
We know.
I was more of the artistic person in music as well as painting, drawing, and stuff like that, where she could not do what I did as far as skill-based on that aspect. I could not do what she did skill-based also. So although we were both, I don't want to say exceptional, but we were good at what we did.
Right.
We were good at different things. So the thing about it, though, is that, like I said, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the brain itself is wired differently. Although you could have identical twins could have the same DNA for the brain, what happens after birth and in growing up wires things differently.
Right.
Okay. And so there's a layer of genetics on top of your genetics, on top of your DNA. We call it epigenetics.
Ooh, okay. I haven't heard of this before.
Okay, so epigenetics is going to be that layer of DNA or the genes that have changed because of environmental conditions while growing up and through your life.
Oh, okay.
So it's a different layer of that. And so going back to the two identical twins, one having cancer, one without, the epigenetics itself would be different because the one smoked and the other one didn't.
Right.
Okay. So same kind of thing there, where you just have a different kind of, they describe it as a layer on top of your genetics, your DNA. And so that could change also everything due to that nurture aspect of everything.
That's really cool. I never, like I said, I'd never heard that term before, and I hadn't thought about how formal, I guess, well, maybe formal is the wrong word, fundamental, some of the things that we do or experience in life can actually literally change our DNA.
So let's go back to the nurture part of it. Okay. So let's say that the argument of nature versus nurture comes in play when you look at personality behaviors. Okay. Let's say an adult male abuses his wife and kids. Is that a result of him being born with violent tendencies, or is that violence something he learned by watching that growing up?
Well, okay. So we know that domestic violence is usually a cycle. So I would say that it's predominantly a learned thing, but I would also assume that there's probably some genetic predisposition that could play a part as well that might help to sway whether that individual will
act on it,
act on that or not.
Yeah, because you're looking at a lot of the different types of behaviors that are genetic. You know, I've always heard that I have my mom's fiery temper. You know, and that comes from the fact that she overreacts to things very easily, just like I do. But again, is that because I watched her do that as a child, or is that something that was just there? And I will also point out that my sister, who also experienced the same childhood I did, is not that personality. She does not have that. So what is that? So there's a lot of different aspects there, how much you learn growing up. With mental illnesses, for example, you know, there's a lot actually research that shows that mental illnesses have a genetic component to it.
Right.
Depression, bipolar. As teachers, we see this one a lot. Attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder.
Definitely.
You know, and then autism as well. And so with that being the genetic aspect of it with mental illnesses, there's also environmental factors that also can lead to those as well, though.
Right.
So I think what it comes down to is this whole nature versus nurture thing has to change. And we have to kind of pivot away from it being one against the other.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, it seems like it's a debate that doesn't really need to happen. It seems more along the lines of we need to accept the fact that you can't blame anything exclusively on one or the other. You have to look at them in tandem.
Well, and so there's this new theories coming out now where, you know, the studies between environment and heredity are all being changed up to where we actually will call it nature with nurture.
Okay.
As opposed to it being versus one the other. And that's a combination of both aspects meeting in the middle, making us the persons that we are as adults. So I'm reading an article just really fast to give you an example. This is an example that they cited. Perfect pitch is an ability to detect the pitch of a musical tone without any references. Researchers have found that this ability tends to run in families and might be tied to a single gene. However, they've also discovered that possessing the gene is not enough, as musical training during early childhood is also needed for the inherited ability to manifest itself.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I don't know anything about perfect pitch, so I definitely will say that I don't have that aspect in my heredity. But I also was never exposed to music theory as a child growing up also.
Well, so as a theater teacher, perfect pitch is one of those things that if you have a kid who has perfect pitch, you're like, oh my God, yes, do all the things. And it's kind of this interesting anomaly. Is in some ways, it's almost just like a party trick, where you can say, hear a metal can struck with another metal object, and they can say, oh, that was a C sharp, or whatever. And it's obviously indicative of a greater musical aptitude, and it definitely makes it easier for them as performers, whether it's singing and matching pitch, or playing an instrument and having to hit the right notes and whatnot. But it's definitely something that has always been, from my perspective, a gift, like a holy grail of something to find in a student.
And then again, that goes back to that epigenetics aspect of it, where your DNA is changed over time as you grow, and that blends also that aspect of what you're born with and what you're exposed to in your developmental ages.
Yeah, in your formative years.
And I would even say, even as an adult, we're still changing and learning.
Yeah.
So,
well, and two, in that same episode of The Unexplained that I was watching, there was a scientist that they were interviewing on there who was actually studying brain scans of people for the nature versus nurture debate. And he was looking at people who have the brainwave markers, at least not the genetic markers, but the brainwave markers for psychopathy, to be a psychopath. Mm-hmm. And he used his own family as a control group. And when he was reviewing the scans, he noticed that one of them, it was a double-blind study, so he didn't know whose was whose, but he noticed that one of them had the clear, defined features of a psychopath. And he at first thought that his lab assistants were playing a joke on him, and they said, no, we didn't do anything, with the scans. This is what actually happened. And so when he finally, broke protocol and peeled back the label to see whose it was his own. And he was, even more convinced at that point that they were playing a joke on him, but they swore that they weren't. And, he was a perfectly, upstanding citizen who never, had any sort of inclination of killing anybody or anything like that. But he did, reflect on the fact that, he does sometimes struggle with empathy and not necessarily being able to, put himself in somebody else's shoes, but that was about it. But I found it fascinating that he was ready to say, oh, well, this person needs to be, reported to the authorities or something, because they've probably done something, and it was his own. Mm-hmm. So it definitely, again, that was a brain scan and not, DNA, but, it goes along the same lines of, just because we have these physical markers for certain things doesn't necessarily default us into a position that means that, things are going to come out at, an anticipated or at an expected outcome.
Yeah. And so you're also going to be looking at, there's a lot of still debate on the two levels of, or topics of, sexual identity.
Right.
And also levels of intelligence, like you were saying earlier. And so those are still things that people still debate and still look at, because the brain itself studying the brain is still such a new science.
Right.
And I want to say new in terms of science in the last 60 to 70 years. I don't want you to think that new is like 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's really where it's coming from there. I guess, and as time goes on, we will learn more about all of these aspects of the brain, and science will change, and that's the whole process of it. It's always changing. As we learn more and more about it, we change our theories and we change our views and our ideals. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like, the debate is really not so much a debate at all, but a discussion. And, our conclusion is that it's not so much like you said, nature versus nurture. It's nature. What was the term? What was the term they're using with nurture?
Nurture, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the most apropos way to approach it. And I guess the only reason it was ever a debate in the first place is because people, especially scientists, no offense, like to have things clear cut and black and white, but things aren't always so simple.
I would debate that statement for another podcast there. I don't think scientists like things clear cut. I think we like having answers to questions. And again, those answers come from the level of technology and level of the tools that we have to measure things and also look at things is where those answers come from.
All right, so it's time for our trivia segment. Last week, we played a little round from a game called Oodles. I realized I forgot to tell you guys the name of it last time. So Michael brought a game this week that is literally in an old Blockbuster Video VHS tape case.
It is Blockbuster, the party game. If you've never played it, you can buy it at Target or Walmart. And so
we're not sponsored by them in any way.
No, but that's just where we buy them. So we'll look at the head-to-head card, and it's going to reveal a movie category. And with that, the first player to think of a movie with that category's theme in it will shout that out, and we'll have to go back and forth with those different categories in the 15-second time frame that the buzzer is on.
Okay, so we just generate different titles.
Yeah, it's almost like a face-off.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so this is head-to-head, so go.
This card's sticking together. Movies in black and white. Casablanca. He's staring at me like a deer in headlights.
The first part of Wizard of Oz.
Sure, we'll say that counts. 12 Angry Men. Oh, my God.
Dracula.
Oh, good one. Schindler's List.
That was in black and white?
Yes, except for the little red girl, or the coat, the girl in the red coat. That's why it was so tragic.
Steamboat Willie.
Oh, nice. Gone with the... No, that was color. The Thin Man. It's an old detective movie.
I don't know of any more.
Oh, come on.
I can't think of... I don't watch movies in black and white.
Young Frankenstein.
No, Gene Wilder was in color in that one.
No, he was in black and white. They shot it in black and white.
Oh, anyway.
Okay, flip another card.
No. Let's do this one.
Okay.
Let's do Quote It.
Okay.
You have to describe your movie to your team by shouting out a quote from the movie.
Oh, God, what if we don't know the quote or don't know quotes from the movie?
Then you make one up.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, for example, for King Kong, I would quote, "My, oh my, what a big monkey that is."
Is that the example they give?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So then I'm just going to pull the movies cards out. And so there's a ton of these.
Oh, sorry. Quote it, not quoted.
I am a member of a 4-family superhero team. I'm not astonishing. I am
Invincible? The Invincibles?
No. You're close. So I know you're thinking that. I just don't think you know the name of the movie.
Oh.
It's The Incredibles.
Oh, Incredible. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Listen, sweetheart. You're going to get on that plane or else you're going to regret
that's Casablanca, isn't that what you just said?
Yes.
You know, the sad part about that is I actually don't see the movie. I see the Muppet version of that where Kermit is telling Piggy.
Yeah.
And then he flies off.
Yeah.
I see that part.
I don't know why I didn't go for Play It Again, Sam, but anyway. He's rejecting cards he doesn't like, just for the record.
That's because I don't know any quotes from them. This one I do.
Okay. That's not a quote. That's just you staring at me creepily.
I'm going to give you the whole monologue from one part of this movie.
Oh, God. Okay.
I consider myself a reasonable merman. I set certain rules, and I expect those rules to be obeyed. Is it true you fell in love with a human?
Yes, Daddy. Yes, the Little Mermaid.
There you go.
Hey, it's my turn. Oh. Well, I'm just a jolly little British bear.
Paddington Bear?
Yeah.
Okay, I have one. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Shall we shag now or shall we shag
Austin
later?
Powers. Damn it, Ripley, just leave that thing alone. Ripley.
Aliens.
Yeah, well, just the one.
Oh. All right, last one. Some pig.
Babe. Oh, Charlotte's Web.
Yes.
Oh,
You
God.
better know that theater teacher starting to put on Charlotte's Web this year, by the way.
I'm not directing that one in my defense.
You should still know what's being put out of your program.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay. So that's it for tonight.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us again for week 2 of
From Art to Adams.
We hope you'll join us again next week for another interesting topic. See ya.
Bye.
You have been listening to From Art to Adams, the Ultimate Curiosity Show, episode number 2. Your hosts are Michael Folse and myself, Brandon Shoemaker. The show is produced by me and is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to the show to stay up to date on all of our latest episodes and news. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggested topics you'd like for us to dive into, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us at FromArtToAdams@gmail.com. We would love to hear from our listeners, and we value your input. Don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content. You can find us on Instagram at From Art to Adams. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach even more interested minds like yours. Thanks for tuning in, and stay curious, everyone.